I'm really excited that our Spain team has pulled together such a wonderful panel for us today. And so let me introduce them one by one, and we'll hop into our panel discussion. So first off, I'd love to introduce Sina Amidi. He's the Managing Director of Plug and Play MEA and the founder of the new verticals of new materials and packaging, as well as food and beverages. And as director of those two verticals at Plug and Play, he's helped corporations like ExxonMobil and PepsiCo innovate through various collaborations with tech startups. And he currently sits on the Plug and Play board of directors and helps Plug and Play expand internationally. Sina, it's a real honor to have you with us this morning.
Thank you so much.
And I'm going to ask each one of our panelists a little quick question. Sina, what's one thing that you've learned since the pandemic began, that and maybe a hobby that you're not going to stop once it ends?
So I'm sorry I get to go first, so if I take your answer, apologies. So one of the things I've learned is at any corporation, decisions can be made quickly as long as there's a drive to do so. I know currently we have to make decisions every day on things that might change the company as a whole, and I hope that we can continue doing that in the years to come.
Fantastic. Thanks, Sina. Next, I'd love to introduce Francesca Wuttke. She's the Chief Digital Officer of Almirall, a leading skin health-focused global pharmaceutical company based in Barcelona, where she leads enterprise-wide digital transformation, working across R&D, commercial, manufacturing, finance, legal, and HR to drive new value creation. And through Almirall's Digital Garden, partners with startups on co-creating new digital solutions of many kinds. Francesca, a real pleasure to have you with us.
Thanks so much for having me, Simon. And I also wanted to mention that we're pleased to count Plug and Play as one of our ecosystem partners for the Digital Garden. So thanks for that. Just a quick introduction. As Simon mentioned, I joined Almirall in February of 2019 to drive the digital innovation and transformation efforts across all of our affiliates globally. We're looking to transform really every aspect of the company, from things like back office, process automation, whether it's manufacturing or finance or HR, through to we're creating a robust data and analytics team, and then within our R&D area, AI-enabled drug discovery and software-enabled clinical trial solutions, as well as some digital therapeutics, which will be hopefully coming out in the next few years. And then on our commercial side, to enable our commercial teams to better interact with both patients and providers. So thank you very much for having me, and I look forward to the panel.
It's a really exciting portfolio of work. So thanks for having me. We're really happy to have you here. I'd like to introduce our next panelist, which is Iñaki Ereño. He's the CEO of the Bupa Europe and LATAM market unit, and also a member of the Bupa steering committee. He's for more than 10 years been the head of Sanitas in Spain, and has been the key driver of the company's digital transformation. Previously, he was on the company's director of clients and marketing, and before Sanitas, he was director of TPI marketing services, president and founder of Nettles.com, and director of client marketing at Care4, or the company that's now known as. I'd love to, Iñaki, do you have your video? I'd love to bring you on. And just got to unmute you as well. Here we go. One more time. Let's see if we can get you on mute. There we go. Perfect. We've got you. We've got you perfectly.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
No, thank you, Simon. It's great. It's great. Look, I don't see me, but do you see me?
See you perfectly.
Okay, great. So look, great to be here. Hello, everybody. So today I am in representation of my first hat, so being the CEO for Sanitas, as Simon said. For you guys that you don't know Sanitas, let me know that we are a health and care company. The main business in where we operate in Spain is the private medical insurance, but we also operate a big hospital and clinics group. We also have homes for the elderly, and we also operate on the dental arenas with dental clinics and dental policies. We serve more than 2 million customers in Spain, and we are In terms of size, around being depending on the industry, but number 2 or number 1 in each, depending whether it's insurance or hospitals. And, so great to be here and ready to share what we have learned in the past, and what we have also learned in the past months during the COVID.
Beautiful. And Iñaki, it was a pleasure. I actually met some of your team, I think back in November when they were out on a visit to Silicon Valley in California. It was terrific to meet them all. So very, very glad to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And, last but indeed not least, our final panelist is Dr. Rafael Bengoa. He's an expert in management, public health, and a strong advocate of universal healthcare. And he's presently the co-director of the Institute of Health and Strategy in the Basque region of Spain. Previously, Dr. Bengoa was Minister of Health of the 9th Legislature of the Basque government, Vice Chairman of Advisory Group Horizon 2020 of the European Union, and was Director of Health Systems at the WHO headquarters in Geneva until 2006. Rafael, it's a real honor to have you with us today.
Thank you, Simon. Just 2 words. I'm like Iñaki in healthcare. More in the public sector than in the private sector, but basically what we're doing is trying to help both of them move towards more integrated care systems, because the present fragmentation, whether you digitalize it or not, is not the right model of care. So we tend to try and help organizations and companies to try to move from, let's call it a sort of an improvised digital system that we've all had to improvise during the COVID months, into a more stable or a bit more, let's say, strategic focus, so that we make sure there's a certain capacity to scale up, and we just don't simply continue trying to expand something in a disorganized way. So I would leave it at that. Thanks, Sam.
Fantastic. And Rafael, that's actually an awesome window segue into our panel. So what we're going to do, folks, we're going to sort of start broad and talk about the evolution of digital technology and technologies in the Spanish health sector. We'd love to talk about how COVID has affected the industry and the sector in particular. We're going to look to the future to talk about what is the future of digital healthcare, particularly in Spain, and then the public and private collaborations that are going to bring about the change. Towards the end of the webinar today, folks, we're going to have a live Q&A. So in the center of your screen, right down the bottom, there's a little Q&A box. And so while we're having our discussion, feel free to put your question down there, and I'll do my best to facilitate those during our live Q&A at the end. If you're having any troubles or connection issues or otherwise, feel free to use the chat box, but I'll be looking at the Q&A. So if you want to ask a question to our speakers, please use that box. So let's hop into our first topic, which is just setting the stage. And so Rafael, perhaps I could start with you. As a global healthcare policy expert, would you mind just giving us a short overview on health sector transformation in Spain? Where have we been? Where do you see things going? Have we lost him? Let's see, Rafael. Oh, there you go.
There you are. Spain is a typical NHS type of system, beverage type of system. And for the last, let's say, 40 years, there's been a massive investment in the public sector. It has been over-bureaucratized, over-politicized in many ways, but the important thing is that it's quite a stable, and it's rooted into the system now. And next to it lies a private system with a battery of insurance groups and insurance provider and private providers, and there's a fairly stable a fairly stable arrangement between the two. Now, both have to, of course, move into the conversation we're having today on digital health. For me, at the policy level, I think the main question will not be about technologies, it won't be about platforms, won't be about all the sophisticated language that you young people have, which I'm trying to understand, let's say about 95% of it. The idea being that at the policy level, you need to take a few decisions about what strategy you're going to follow, but on digital health. But before that, you have to decide something which is fairly simple, is what's the model of care where this is going to fit? Because if you just fit all the potential, the digital potential that we have now in the world, and you fit it in the present organization, at least in Spain, what you're going to have is a fairly performant acute care system, which is not doing well with chronic conditions and is obviously not doing well in prevention. Now, this is fairly important because if you don't have the model of care that you're driving towards, it'll be much more difficult to fit all the digital capacity in it. So I'm just saying that I'm not stalling the digital introduction, and Spain is fairly forward. For example, Spain has, in both private and public sector, a very expanded electronic medical record. Patients in most part of the country have access to their medical record at any time, etc. So we're pretty advanced compared to other countries. But we need to be able to identify first what model we're in, and then digital will then fit in a much better and more scaled up way.
Wow, fantastic. And perhaps I could move to Francesco. You know, you've led digital transformation initiatives in industry in multiple countries, multiple geographies. And I'm wondering, how do you see sort of how technology is transforming the health system, perhaps generally, but obviously specifically in Spain? And maybe there are some particular challenges or opportunities that you've observed in the Spanish sector.
Sure. Well, I think generally, you know, pharma's been quite late to the game in terms of digital transformation. I think the industry at large is so heavily regulated that I think it's, you know, the risk aversion is quite high. I think what's been interesting within Spain is the level of digital innovation that already exists here, and I think the startup ecosystem is not well known outside of Spain and even within Europe, but certainly globally. And I've been really impressed with the caliber of companies that have been born out of Spain, and many of them have since gone elsewhere. But I think there's almost a certain scrappiness around in a very positive way around the startups that I've seen in Spain. They often haven't been very well funded, which is one of there's a funding gap, I think, for many of the companies that live and work here. But they've done a tremendous amount, and their reach has been really, really impactful and impressive, to be honest. So, you know, I think, you know, pharma still has their work cut out for it with regard to really embedding digital solutions and services. But I think Spain in general is quite well poised, perhaps needs a bit more PR. To kind of spread the word to other areas as a real hub of innovation, I think Barcelona in particular.
Yeah, interesting. So yeah, high caliber of companies, but I think that's something that we picked up actually in our last event with ISEX was around venture, and I think we had a bunch of investors saying, look, you know, there's a lot of opportunity here. It's just about getting the investment in. Really interesting. I'd love to, we'll hear more about what you are doing with the Digital Garden in a second, Francesca. But I'd love to, you know, so we've had sort of the public health view, the industry view, but Iñaki, you know, from the payer perspective and also from a provider perspective, you know, COVID has affected different countries in various different ways. Perhaps you could give us a sense of, from your view, like what's it revealed about the Spanish health system? You know, could you help us understand how has Sanitas responded, how has it responded with patients and also leveraging technology?
I think, yes, would be great. Look, I have a bit of not very optimistic view on the level of digitalization and the level of innovation, the whole health ecosystem in Spain, including the public and the private area. I am have worked more on the private area than in the public area. In the private area, you still have a lot of companies really asking those big questions on whether doctors are prepared for this, patients are prepared for this. And when you say, look, it's year 2020, and yes, they are, then, you know, they get very surprised and they start arguing. So I think COVID has been a disaster for everybody. But one of the things that has brought is, I hope, the end of useless discussions on whether health is a different industry and cannot be digitalized. My thesis here has always been, is health is another industry like every other industry that has to be digitalized. Allow me to share with you a small example that for us is not so small, you know, it's big, but I think it represents well the change that COVID is bringing to Spain. Before COVID, so we were pursuing a product called Plua. Basically, Plua was having a doctor available in your mobile phone, not a doctor of a call center. Is your doctor, the doctor that you see in the morning, and then he is available for you also at night. Okay, so we pushed very hard the product, with a lot of difficulties. We trained and put 3,000 doctors before COVID, and before COVID, the day that we were doing more than 300 digital consultations, we were super happy. So we were really, really, really celebrating. During the COVID, citizens have felt alone. They have felt forgiven by the public system, by the private system, by everybody. And thanks God, we were able to offer this. So the system moved from 300 digital consultations a day, which was the best day. We jumped to 6,000 a day, very stable.
Wow.
And the good thing is that doctors started to ask us, hey, I want to be part of that. So before COVID, we had 3,000 doctors. Now we have 4,000 doctors. Before COVID, only 20% of those doctors were really using this. After COVID, 50% of the doctors, they use the system at least once a month. And look, when the peak of COVID went down, we thought, okay, so the good times of the 6,000 consultations a day will go down. We don't know until that point, but it has remained very stable on the 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. Okay, so I think really doctors are much more prepared than we discuss sometimes. Patients are absolutely prepared. That I agree with Rafael that it's not a technology discussion, it's more a willingness to change things discussion. And I think the technology is here to stay. The technology, the cost is absolutely affordable by everybody. It's just us moving. And this is what I think we have to. We need to keep moving, use this wave that COVID has brought, which is, I don't know what the name of this wave is, but it's in reality is the wave of not having any more useless discussions about health should be digitalized, because it's already in the process and will be.
Yeah, I can hear the cheers from the crowd in the background. Yeah, very, very interesting. And look, I mean, one of the things which Francesca, you mentioned, you know, pharma's been in a little bit of catch-up mode. You know, a lot of the firms that we've worked with at Plug and Play, it was very, very interesting actually interacting with our CEO in the aftermath of COVID through this fireside chat series and getting the opportunity to speak to senior leaders. But Sina, you know, from your vantage point, leading in MEA for Plug and Play, like what have you seen in terms of other industries or companies in terms of the response? Have you seen folks sort of say, hey, this is now the mandate for digital transformation, or have they, I don't know, been sort of more defensive or using it as an opportunity? Like, what have you been seeing?
Sure. So let me first comment a little bit about what Iñaki said. I 100% agree. It's industries as a whole do have their specializations, but at the same time, we do share a lot of similarity across industries. So no one is special and everyone has to digitalize at the same rate. One of the great examples is healthcare is more expensive than what happens in, food and beverage. But what happens in healthcare eventually will move to livestock. And it is important to watch healthcare even if you're in food and beverage. So, the industries do have parallel industries to them. Simon, to answer your question, well, we do have a lot of useless conversations going on. And what we've noticed from, EMEA as a whole is a lot of the companies that say, let me wait until after COVID, let me wait until I see what happens. And, it's been 6 months and we're still waiting and we're going to wait. So every conversation I have like that makes me a little bit more pessimistic. But as Plug and Play as a whole, we've seen a lot of companies come to us and say, I want to invest in my transformation. And my transformation is really important to me. So last year I would have invested a little bit. Now I'm going to change everything I do and I'm open to it because I need to stay and keep up with the times today. And that's what we're seeing. So yes, we see less than the amount of people that came to us as before, but the people who are coming to us now are ready to actually make a change within their organizations. And it's very optimistic. And these are the companies of the future.
That's actually really interesting. I was actually reading a McKinsey report, Sina, of what happened after the 2007, 2008, 2009 season. And they basically found exactly the same thing, that on the whole, there was a fair bit of cutting in terms of innovation, but the leading firms, the top quartile, used that as an opportunity to invest even more. And during that time made huge gains and left the rest, left the rest behind. Rafael, I'd love to bring you back in terms of speaking about the Spanish context. What have you seen? How has COVID sort of changed the conversation? You were saying, look, it's not so much about the technologies now. It's really about coming, up with a common vision so things aren't fragmented. Have you seen reasons to be positive? Are those kinds of conversations happening at the moment? What are you seeing?
No, I don't think they're happening yet. I think that's why I was mentioning that we have to get policymakers at the subnational level and at the national level in Spain, those who are basically managing 7% of GDP in the public system. We have to get them on the, I think just to follow what Iñaki, the will is there, but governments need help to shape the strategy. I think they haven't now, during COVID, they're still trying to control COVID. So they haven't launched the design of a strategy to digitalize that. I think there are several entry points that companies could use. I don't think it's useful to go into and say, look, let's start talking now in the present situation because COVID is still very present. Can I come in and strategize with you about how you can digitalize your whole healthcare system in Andalusia or in Catalonia? What is useful, I think, for a company to do is to say, look, what are your problems now? For example, in 3 months, everybody's going to have to get their act together to vaccinate. So I can see a lot of links between the digital world helping in some sort of quick program, helping a government in whatever part of Spain or Europe, and basically saying, look, you're going to need to vaccinate all these people. Why don't we do a digital connection with all those, although there's a digital divide, but with all those that we can, let's do a digital connection to encourage them to take up the vaccine, to give them confidence that the vaccine is safe, all these things that are going to be in the air. So what I'm saying is that policymakers now need sort of pretty specific help. But once you get your foot in there with that specific type of program, I think then it's going to be much easier to open up broader conversations in terms of a larger investment in the public sector. And then the other point I'd just like to make is that if you're a payer, like I was in the Basque Country or Iñaki's in Madrid in the private sector, you need evidence. Now, we need to build the evidence. I mean, for example, we ask for tons of evidence in relation to whether a new cancer drug is valuable or not valuable for what it costs at present. So those questions are beginning to appear also, of course, with the technological world. And so I think both the public and the private sectors have to somehow, and companies, build the evidence base to show that it is cost effective to take this line of work.
You know, Iñaki mentioned that, you know, they went from 300 televisits to 6,000. I'm wondering, from your vantage point, was this an evidential gap that that held back the proliferation of telemedicine? Are we demonstrating that evidence now?
No, that's a really good point. No. That's a very good point, Simon. It wasn't evidence that suddenly appeared at the end of February and said, okay, let's digitalize. It was need, is the mother of necessity. So yep. You had to establish contact with both COVID and non-COVID patients, and that worked. So in the private sector, the same figures happened, of course, in proportion in the public sector, and it's been quite impressive how both patients and doctors and nurses have said, yes, this is going to be our new normal. And so I think we have to just build on what was just called the wave, and we need to be able to say, look, the infrastructure is there. You might need to invest a bit more. And if the capacity is there, technological capacity, invest in infrastructure, but design a strategy to move this forward. But I think you're right that, but now I think when things calm down, they'll be asking for evidence because they will need to know how to fund this. In March, April, May, nobody was worried about how to fund something. They just had to continue be in touch with patients. Now their questions are going to be from, let's say, December, January, are going to be, well, how do I fund this in both the public and private sector? So I need evidence.
Yeah. Iñaki, do you want to jump in on that? How are you thinking about, you know, balancing the needs of the moment versus thinking strategically, you know, a few months down the track?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, there we go. Look, the classic way of working, which was the public system opens a conversation in where the private system jumps in, and hopefully we build up a policy and we start working. I think that is a paradigm that in the new digitalized world we can't follow. We can't expect something like this. I think, and this is because, first of all, because of probably budgetary, but also because of professional curiosity. You find more curiosity and probably more capacity to invest in new tools on the private arena. So I think there's a role to play with the private participants of the system. And then while you invest, while you start doing something, then you get together with the public system, and then both together, so it has changed the paradigm. Look, this is what has happened to specifically to me. So I got 2 calls from 2 regional health ministers in relation to this tool for video consultations. And, you know, they have asked, you know, how you guys do this. So we want to, and then when we have gone through different set of meetings, then, for example, they discovered that the technology is not the bottleneck and the cost is much lower than they thought, blah, blah, blah. So we have prepared with, in both cases, kind of a small platform just in case it's needed. So the paradigm has changed, and we need to adapt. And there's a role to play on the private participants, I think.
Yeah, fantastic. And look, Francesca, I'd love you to comment. I mean, you've been working with the accelerator and working with startups in a variety of capacities. Has this a destigmatization, or is this sort of renewed, or maybe an awakening about the possibility and the value that technology provides? Are you seeing that shift the way that you in Almirall are partnering with startups, or do you see that shaping the startup ecosystem at the moment or going into the future?
Yeah, certainly. And I think I see it in two key ways. With the startups themselves, we've been really impressed by how quickly they've been able to pivot to address some of the needs of COVID. We had one startup in our digital garden called Intrepida, and they have a platform for clinical trial recruitment, mostly focused on oncology. But within 2 weeks, they were able to switch their AI algorithm to start recruiting for trials for COVID, which was, really impressive. And I think a good lesson internally to show how to be really agile and how to embrace chaos and external situations to try to move your business or your project forward. I would say, this is not a sexy an observation, I guess, but within Almirall, I noticed that the narrative during the confinement period really changed the way we think about technology. And I agree with you 100%, Rafael. It's not about a technological change, because I think the technology exists. It's about how we interact with that technology. But even something very simple as everyone being stuck at home and having to use things like Zoom and Teams and Google Meet and all these other things, destigmatized the complexity of these things. It became very easy to jump on a Teams meeting and share your screen. And while that seems pretty basic at this point, because all of us have been doing this now for the past 6 months, at the time, it was somewhat groundbreaking. And so it allowed us to say, okay, well, see, that's not so scary. There are other things that we can do that are also equally attainable. And so I think it helped us to have more realistic conversations about what can be done and what should be done, within our organization. With regard to telemedicine in particular, I think it's an area that has evolved tremendously because of this, the situation that we find ourselves in. In Spain, in particular, the one issue that I found that I think has to change from a regulatory or policy perspective is the e-prescription. So at the moment, e-prescriptions aren't possible in Spain, which limits the breadth that a teleconsultation can have, because you still need to somehow get a physical piece of paper and take it to your pharmacy. So little things like that turn out to be, I wouldn't say technology stoppers, but certainly hiccups along the road have been made clear as a result of the situation. And those are the sorts of things that we'll need to work on going forward.
Yeah, and I think that very much echoes Iñaki and Rafael's conversation around this. That was a perfect example of a startup coming in, solving an immediate need, and it provides the evidence for potentially the broader conversation. In terms of the policies and the enabling policies, I see a hand, Iñaki.
Can I jump in just a second, because Francesca was saying something about the e-prescription. So this is a good example of how things look, how things is a bit of a surprise that we say something thanks to COVID, but we were fighting very much for the prescription to be approved, and it has been approved thanks because of COVID. So now
that's great.
Now it's possible. So this is how, again, it also connects with the point that Rafael was saying, that the will is there. So it's how we organize that will and make it all happen. That's the question.
That's great to hear. I think the trajectory of the acceleration has increased as a result of COVID.
Yeah.
Another good example.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And look, I want to open it up to the audience in a second, but I want us to just talk a little bit about the policies and the public-private collaboration piece. Perhaps I could start with Rafael. In terms of, you've been talking about policies needing to catch up, this idea of having a coherent strategy. Could you comment on what are the
We lost our moderator.
We can't hear anything. Yeah.
Yeah, he's gone.
It's gone. Yeah.
Trying to come back.
So one of the things that's really interesting for me is we're talking about digitization and innovation in general. So healthcare is actually an innovative sector. I mean, you have to be innovative. You have to keep up with pharmaceuticals. You know, people are changing, and you know, our drugs are getting better and better. So that has been happening forever. What's interesting to me is the digitization of the other parts. So, you know, it's a service. So is it easier or harder to get an appointment? Or the digitization of um, even your supply closets, because, you know, it's are the orders done automatically? Is there somewhere where, you know, our healthcare can buy from the pharmaceutical companies very easily? But when we talk about healthcare digitization, we don't talk about the parallel technologies we can find that are already existing in other sectors. Are you looking at other sectors to bring over technology?
Okay, well, Simon, can you hear us?
I think I'm back. I don't know what the Zoom gods were doing, but they kicked me off. I must have been a naughty boy. So, but I thought that was a great question, Sita. Was that one to Francesca, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, if Francesca would be great for how, you know, procurement works between the two people, and it's just interesting for me because after talking, we talked a lot about telemedicine, but we didn't talk about procurement or service or anything like that.
It's a very good point, and in fact, this morning we had several conversations with procurement, and what we're trying to do is pave the way at Almirall more broadly with startups and pharma procurement, because, you know, when I was an investor with Merck's Global Health Innovation Fund, we tried to get one of the startups we were thinking about investing through the qualification process, and they called me about 18 months after some of our initial conversations, and they said, "Hey, congratulations, you know, the startup you wanted is through the process." And I sort of chuckled and said, "Well, the startup no longer exists because they needed the commercial agreement in order to get the funding, and the commercial agreement took 18 months just to get through the qualification." So, you know, I think pharma and the industry at large needs to streamline those kinds of processes for startups, and we're trying to do that, you know, here at Almirall. And another area is also in legal. You know, a startup doesn't have the bandwidth or really the wherewithal to manage a 400-page contract. So, you know, keep it really simple. Let's not add, you know, tons of bells and whistles, and you know, have a kind of not to be old-fashioned, but a kind of gentleman's agreement that you can get through things in a reasonable way without putting a lot of you know, legalese associated with it. So I think it's important for those things to happen, and also to make pharma seem more startup friendly by having, you know, different processes for a startup versus a more established company. Does that answer your question?
That's really interesting, Francesca.
I mean,
I'll let Tina be the judge. It was his question.
It sounds like, which is the case in a lot of industries, that it's so hard to innovate in even the easiest parts that it's almost, it seems like it's not worth taking the risk.
And I think there's an inertia in, you know, in people's day-to-day where they don't want to take that risk, and it is kind of a pain to start on this process. And if people aren't accustomed to working with startups, it can be quite eye-opening. So, you know, it does take a little bit of hand-holding, you know, from our side on the digital office with the broader organization, but it's quite shocking to the startup. So, you know, we have to be prepared for their reactions to things as well. We had a program where within the Digital Garden, that we tried to give them kind of Pharma 101 to prepare them for what a pharma sales cycle looks like, what a procurement process and qualifying process looks like, to get them ready to kind of get their story together and their materials together to collaborate and partner with pharma. But
can I just come in very quickly?
Please, Raphael.
Because sorry, but I may have to leave. So I just wanted to say that there's some sort of significant implications for staff in all this. If a company goes into talk with a policymaker, I think both public and private, and if you go in with a techie approach, they immediately classify you as technological freaks. And so what happens is that they want to know what the consequences are. For example, what's been really useful in Spain, and I think it would be very interesting for ETHEX to move forward, is to make sure the Spanish government and all the governments in Spain make sure that the bureaucratic barriers that were getting in the way before and that were removed during the pandemic, make sure that they stay removed. That's the first thing. The second thing is this implications for staff. The implications for staff are really important because, you know, doctors and nurses have been improvising how to play with Zoom, Teams, and company. But I think there's an element of training there. So basically, I think it's important to approach the administrations and other with a sort of package, not just with, okay, we are the guys that in 2 weeks can set this thing up. And then between the question you were saying between the public and private sector, well, what I think it's useful what ETHEX and what you guys are doing is that there's not enough shared learning across the two. And maybe the digital world can help precisely develop some sort of networks where you can share learning about how we're all moving forward on digitalization.
That feels like a very soft plug, but I might. One of the things I've actually noticed in some of our other industries, you know, I came into Plug and Play after a career in healthcare, but joined InsurTech, and one of the things I heard, Francesca, was just this from a lot of digital officers was we didn't know it was possible to do a one-page non-disclosure agreement. Like we didn't know it was actually possible, and there is something about those collaborations amongst the innovation teams to essentially create evidence or a bank of best practices for how this sort of stuff can happen. Look, I want to bring in some of our audience members. So I think there's a Pablo Caballero from VitaHealth is asking about. He speaks about the amount of money that goes into investing in it appears to be treatments, but a lot less in prevention, and notes that it appears that there's not very clear paths to address, you know, the complexity, particularly in the prevention space. And do you think the healthcare sector is losing a lot of innovative solutions due to a lack of harbors that startups can use to land the sector? And I suppose he's speaking particularly in the health prevention promotion space. I mean, I wonder, maybe that's a good one for, well, Francesca, do you want to speak to that one? Or alternatively, I was thinking maybe that's a Raphael question.
Well, I can certainly start, and then Raphael, please jump in. I think that I'll put my investor hat on for the moment, but I think there is a significant funding gap in Europe. You know, there's very early stage funding. There's less kind of A, B stage funding, and then it seems like the bigger, more established, more stable, less risky companies do get funded. So, you know, I think the digital health investment ecosystem in Europe broadly is evolving. It's certainly not at the same pace that it's evolved in the US. I think Plug and Play certainly is helping with that evolution. But you know, there are really good companies to be had in Europe, and in my view, at much more reasonable valuations. So it should be a much more attractive, you know, I would say, profiling ground for US and Asian investors than it historically has been. But increasingly, I'm seeing a lot more international investment money coming into Europe. So it's
yeah. So
please,
one
go
of
ahead.
the things I've realized we just noticed is to invest in A to B rounds. The problem is I need to become a certified investor to raise a fund. And to become a certified investor in Europe, you need to hire someone with 5 years of experience under a certified investor. So it doesn't make sense unless you're raising a bigger fund. So I mean, like that's what I just realized in the last few weeks, that this is why the gap is there, and
Yeah,
that's why it starts to run away.
and I know colleagues in Spain in particular who have tried to go through that process, and it's there's a lot of bureaucracy. It's pretty tough to do, and so people would rather associate themselves with a fund in the UK and either commute or work from Spain to do so. But maybe on a policy level as well, that's something that we can look to change.
In relation,
I'd love to ask Iñaki to jump in, because on the just building on the prevention health promotion side, Iñaki, I know that you guys have been doing a fair bit with thinking about how to unlock data. How are you guys thinking about leveraging partnerships to define ways of the preventive diagnosis or population health management and those kinds of things?
I think here the issue is the lack of clarity of the results of preventive programs that we initiate. So the closest to this that we have done in the last years is we have built up a chronic disease management preventive programs based on a coaching system. It's been working for the last 6 or 7 years. We built up an algorithm to try to measure the effects of this. And to be honest, there's a lot of high recognition and a lot of customer satisfaction, but there's any number that is really juicy and really, that could indicate this is the path, So I guess we are all in the hunt for that number. We're in the hunt for that excuse for investing more in that space.
Yeah, Rafael, I'd love to hear what you think about that.
My comment would be, if you've noticed, COVID has failed just about everywhere in the world, control, because we didn't have prevention or population management of the issue. So, and this is both in countries with public systems, with private insurance, whatever. So the word prevention is going to scale up from now on, which means we're going to go towards prevention, population health, integrated care, and all those fancy words that we've been throwing around for 10 years. But now it's going to happen, because it has to happen, because you cannot reach the next pandemic in 2, 3, or 5 years' time. We cannot reach without a population, public health, strong public health system. That's not ideological. That's what you need. And everybody's going to need that. So the word prevention and the link with digital health is more and more evident. So if I was in a company, I would be making that link with whatever technology I'm in control in relation to move towards population health. That's what I would buy if I was back in the administration.
Fantastic. Well, look, folks, time flies when you're having fun, and we're at the top of the hour. So what I'd love to do is just go around and look, if there's one take-home point when you're thinking about the digitalization of healthcare, particularly in the Spanish healthcare. We have startups, we have health professionals, we have health companies on the line, we have investors. Perhaps one take-home point about what you're inspired by, what you're working on, something to leave our audience with today. Maybe I'll. How about we finish in the order we began? So, Rafael, maybe I'll give it to you first. It's possible we may have lost him. I think he did have to go. All right, so I think we had his final word. So, Iñaki, I'll ask you to go now.
Yeah, two comments here. So one, I think two learnings from COVID again also is, one is we don't have a solid, consistent, big platform of triage, digital triage, that I think we need. I mean, as a country, I mean, as a whole, not my company, that we don't also have. But the point, and the second one, and the second is we also need to stay forward on providing digital capabilities for domiciliary hospitalization. And I'm very happy to to announce we will be launching a big campaign in Spain, Spain, all around Spain at the end of the year in this regard. So we will give the possibility for people to be hospitalized at home with a lot of digital things. So thank you. It's been great to be here.
Oh, that's fantastic. I think you just, that's like saying something very interesting and saying goodbye, so we'll have to bring you back.
No, but I will remain to
Teaser.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, very smart, Iñaki. Very nice. That's why they pay you the big bucks. Francesca, some final words for our audience.
Yeah, I think learnings from COVID that I think will persist is that we just have to do it. We just have to take the risk, take the leap, and it'll bear fruits for our patients and physicians, which is I think who stand to benefit from it the most. So we just need to try and experiment a little bit more than I think as an industry we have. And I suspect the rate of acceleration will certainly be much faster and steeper going forward.
Mm. Yeah, and I think that really links to what Rafael said. I think he almost provided a little recipe for us earlier on, where he said, look, solve the burning platform now. Like things are burning, fix that now. That gives you the evidence and the trust, and creates a story that enable us to be more forward-leaning and strategic to actually implement some of these things in the coming months. Final word to you, over to you, Sina.
So, I mean, for me, I think one of the things I learned is if there's a will, there's a way. So even in something like healthcare, where there's a lot of bureaucracy and bureaucracy grows every year, we can make differences and changes quite quickly when everyone gets together and tries to do them. So it's quite impressive what's going on, and just in Spain, how much has changed so fast. I hope this all continues.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, look, thank you so much, Sina, Francesca, Rafael, Iñaki. Wonderful discussion, very, very rich. I feel like we could have gone on for triply as long. But I want to thank all of our audience members here today as well for joining us. Look, and I also want to thank ISEX for partnering with us on bringing this webcast. So thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.
For
Take
attending.
Thanks, everyone.
Iñaki.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Francesca.